Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today I am back to review the ZMF Verite Closed. Right, dynamic driver, closed back headphone, which people have been asking me to review for a while, and so here it is. This was loaned to me by the same friend of the channel who normally has loaned a lot of high-end gear to me. So thanks to Mr. SA11297 again. Right, I owe you a lot for getting this channel off the ground. And so yeah, these came from him and were sent to me directly from the person who he bought these from. All that. So we'll get into the review here in just a moment. But as usual, please remember to like, subscribe, and do all of those things that you normally do to support YouTube channels. And real quick, you might hear my voice still sounding just a little bit off. I was sick about a week ago. But I'm feeling a lot better now. It's just still lingering in my voice, making it just a little bit more raspy than usual. So apologies for that. And you might hear that all the more because I'm also trying a new microphone that hopefully improves the audio on this channel. All right, so let's dig into the review on this. So the ZMF Verite Closed, what is it? As I said, it is a full-sized dynamic driver headphone from artisan headphone maker ZMF Headphones. Okay, and so here in the audiophile community, the name ZMF is just synonymous with high build quality, really just gorgeous wood cups on them, and just general, they have a reputation for making very fine sounding headphones and all that. So there's and there's a lot of truth in that. This is the third ZMF model I have had the privilege of reviewing. The first was an Icon back in the fall of 2020. It's been a while on that one, I believe. And then last fall 2021, I had the privilege of reviewing the O-Tour. And so now I'm getting up to what was their flagship line. They have just announced the Atrium, and I think some of those are trickling out now. But I don't believe those are going to replace the Verite line at all. So I think these are still very much out there and can be bought and should be considered if you're looking for a headphone, particularly a closed back in this price range. So what is that price range? The Verite Closed starts at $2,700 US and then goes up in price with options from there. All right, this particular unit is part of the epoxy stabilized versions that they were running here. And so we have the wood and the epoxy going on. And I mean, just hopefully the camera catches that well. I mean, they are beautiful. They are gorgeous. And that craftsmanship, that ZMF craftsmanship is definitely there. They put a lot of care into both the build and the aesthetics of their headphones, and it works. Like you know a ZMF when you see it, and they look great, they feel great, even though, it's not super heavy. I never had any comfort issues with it. There's some weight to it when you hold it, but on the head, I'd never really noticed that. But anyway, all of that just exudes excellent build quality. This particular unit is part of the Acastris 10 line, and the wood is that in the packaging it says is a Buckeye burl. The seller who sold these to my benefactor also got some extra pads that came with it. The Universe pads, which I think are the sort of the Verite standard stock pad, so to speak. That's what's on here right now, and that is what I did most of my listening with. Let's see, we also have here, I think these are the, what are these? I'm gonna struggle to remember these now. These, I believe, are the BE squared, beryllium squared, is that what that stands for? Pads from ZMF. We have I think these are the O-Tour Lamb, or maybe I got those two backwards. Oops, probably heard that. Sorry, I'm gonna have to get used to that. All right, these are one of these two pair here is the O-Tour Lamb, and the other is the BE squared, and then also got Icon suedes to come with these. But I ended up going with the Universe for most of my listening. I thought it sounded the best. I also thought that like it fit the best. Like both of them that are this size here. So this would be the O2er version, and then the BE squared ones, all that. In either case, the ear opening was a bit too small for even my very average size ears. Like I could feel them sitting on my earlobes in uncomfortable ways for me with those, because they're not particularly deep. The Icon suedes were deeper, but I did not think they are similarly deep, I would say, to the Universe pads that are on here. Okay, but they didn't sound as good in my opinion. So that's why I went with the Universe pads for the bulk of my testing. Okay, what else do you need to know about this from a build standpoint and a specification standpoint? 300 ohm impedance. So if you like to use tube amps, particularly OTL tube amps, these are a good option for that. And then the sensitivity is about 99 decibels per milliwatt, according to ZMF's website. So yes, 300 ohms is high impedance, but 99 dB per milliwatt is getting into reasonably efficient territory. So they are not a particularly arduous load on an amplifier that I found. And so most amps that I put them on that aren't, you know, just dongle DACs or DAPs or anything handled these quite well. All right, other than that, like, I mean, just the actual build of it, you get a lot of cup swivel here. Okay, the head size adjustment, we have these rods right here, okay, that kind of do this ratcheting motion, or ratcheting kind of click in place there. I don't have the largest of heads, okay, at least physically, and so I generally don't need to expand things too much. But I also got the comment from the other half, all that these can look like little bug antenna when you wear them, and she's probably onto something. They do. They're up there. Okay, the headband is sort of nominally a suspension strap system. You've got this leather band in there, and then there's still also padding in here, and I think that is a spring steel headband in there. Anyway, they are well built, well designed. They feel fine on the head. I didn't have any comfort issues with the Universe pads. I mean, these pads were a little bit too small for me, as I just mentioned. But comfort-wise and all of that, it was good. Cable entry, dual mini 4-pin XLR here. So the cables that came with it here is, we have a single-ended 1/4 inch. Okay, here I didn't actually end up using this cable at all. Okay, you have a lot of different cable options when you buy a ZMF. So go into them. Like this is the stock XLR cable, and you can see it has a fair amount of memory to it and gets coiled up. So it's not the most ergonomically friendly cable I've ever used. What I ended up using for most of my listening was this cable right here that I have plugged into my Audeze LCD2 pre-phaser right now. That is a Forza Noir hybrid, I want to say. And that's what I used on here the most. Fit fine, worked fine, sounded great. Okay, a little bit more friendly to use. All right, for that. Okay, with those cables that I just showed you, all of these pads, the epoxy stabilized cups and all of that, the owner who sold these said they spent around $3,600 for the entire set. So we are talking high-end stuff here again. Okay, beryllium drivers on part of the ZMF, so it's a dynamic driver, beryllium driver. That has been talked about ad nauseum around the interweb, so I will only mention that here, and then we will get into the sound. But I just want to reiterate that these things are beautifully built. They look great. They feel great. There is just world-class craftsmanship going on here, as you would expect from ZMF. I mean, they deliver on that every time. And there's a definite pride of ownership. Like, I don't actually own these, but if I were, I would be very proud that you get something of this high quality. And then it's also because of the wood grain and the epoxy, and you know, with the epoxy stabilized line and all of that, you get just a lot of, everyone is unique, okay? Each headphone, even though they are all of the same model and so forth, like, they are a one-of-a-kind piece. and that makes them special and all that. And so there's definitely a pride of ownership that comes with that. Okay, the sound. Now that we have covered all of that ground, what do these sound like? So I have heard these characterized before in a couple of places as like the best sounding closed back out there. Now these have been around longer than the Dan Clark Audio Stealth, but even with the Stealth out there, I've heard a lot of people still prefer these. The Stealth being a $4,000 unit, and I have reviewed that, and I can link to that below. Other things that I hear lauded about these are some people really like their detail retrieval. I still hear positive comments about timbre and tonality because they are ZMF, and that's kind of a ZMF thing right there, is timbre and tonality. And then I've also heard a lot about how these punch, like how hard they hit, particularly in the low end. They have some slam to them. So I was really excited when I got these, really interested in all of that. Now, they arrived to me not fully broken in. That much was apparent. And so I put about another 100 hours of fairly hard driving break-in on these. Like, I know it was over 100. I don't know the exact number. It was over 100. I gave them several overnight and then through the workday sessions of being powered off of my Vioelectric HPA V281, driven at about 85 dB average levels. So they got a good workout in on the break-in, and again, over 100 hours of that. Real quick signal chains that I tried with these. I tried these off of my Cord Hugo 2. I also used, I just mentioned, my Vioelectric HPA V281 amp. I used my KN HA1A Mark II tube amp. I used my Lake People G111 for a little bit. I just got in a Garage 1217 Project Ember. I tried these on there for a little bit. And are there any other amps that I used? Well, several. Okay, so it was several. And then I also, for DACs, I used the Hugo 2, the Matrix X Saber 3 Pro DAC and Streamer, and then my trusty Berkeley Audio Designs Alpha Series 2 with a Singer SU2 USB bridge. Okay. I found the signature on these guys to be mid-centric. There's not, regardless of pads, and again, I tried all of the pads that are here, enough to get a feel for them, landed on the Universe. So most of these comments are going to be about the Universe. The extension, the frequency extension, both in the bass and in the treble, is okay. It's not spectacular. It's not going to be a standout feature of this headphone. And then also, like, not only in terms of, like, is it there, there's a bit of a roll-off, both in the very high highs and the really deep sub-bass, to the point where the mid-range becomes the focus. So I'd say the overall signature is mid-centric. Now, I don't want to call it mid-forward, but there is a little bit of excess energy around the 1 kilohertz to 1.5 kilohertz range again. And then there's a bit of a dip in through the 400-ish to around 800 maybe hertz range. So that the upper mids, or at least that middle 1 kilohertz region, is just a little bit more forward than that lower region. So there's not a lot of warmth here, and nor is there a whole lot of fullness or body to the sound, and then there is a bit of a hollow timbre and tonality to it because of that. Then getting up into the treble, there's just ever so much of a little bit of a peak in the sibilance region. They do get a little bit more sibilant than other headphones that I have heard in the high end. Not terribly, it happens a little bit. It's there. To me, the bigger issue tonally is in that 1 kilohertz, 1.5-ish kilohertz range in there. And then accompany that, which it's not a huge elevation, but accompanying it is that bit of a scoop through the kind of the heart of the mid-range in that, maybe 300-400 up to 700-800 hertz range, somewhere in there. which again makes it sound very mid-centric to me, and it just has a hollow timbre, hollow tonality to it for me, like not a whole lot of body or weight or fullness to the sound, not really a whole lot of warmth either through that range, or because of that frequency response through there. Okay, so vocals got a little bit shouty and honky to me again. Some instruments, like some piano keys that would get pressed in that 1 kilohertz, 1 to 1.5 kilohertz range, could get a little sharp and aggressive, and I would flinch sometimes. Not all the time, but it happened, and all of that. So to me, the timbre and the tonality is not what I was expecting. With the Icon and the O-Tour, there was a fair amount of warmth, very even response through the mid-range that just ended up with a really silky smooth, very natural mid-range timbre. This one, to my ear, falls short of that a little bit. Now, the detail retrieval here is pretty good. It's not set the world on fire good. I'm not going to say it's good for a closed back. I'm just going to say it's reasonably good. It's not the most resolving headphone that I've heard up, north of $3,000. Like, it's not as resolving as my Hi-Fi-Man HE1000 V2, but the resolution is still pretty good. Even though there is that scoop through the mids that I was talking about, the overtones and the string actions of bass guitars and all that is resolved very well. So there is a fair amount, and the bass is also quite textured. The bass that is there is well textured, and so forth. So the detail retrieval is solid. Okay, I didn't have any issues with that. The spatial presentation is also pretty good. The soundstage isn't huge. It's not necessarily tall or deep, but it's got some width to it. It's not wall of sound. Like, I don't want it to sound like that. There is some depth, just it's not overly deep or overly tall, but some good width. Especially, I mean, when you talk staging, that's where the closed back nature can really become an issue. Like, it sounds fairly wide for a closed back headphone, and the imaging and the separation are really good. Like, there's a pretty holographic spatial presentation within its soundstage that I found rather impressive there. And then, like, the overall presentation is reasonably clear and clean sounding. So it's, I think because it's not warm, because there's not a whole lot going on in the deep sub bass and like all of that, like there's not really, even though it's hollow sounding in its tonality and in its timbre, it still sounds very clean and clear, not congested at all or anything like that, unlike me at the moment. Okay, so that is good in that there too. Now, there's not a lot of physicality to the sound. The dynamics are not poor. The dynamics are quite good, actually, I would say, through the mids and up into the treble. Like, drums can sound really good on this. Snare drums have a nice, quick, authoritative snap to them when they happen. Cymbal crashes, as long as they don't fall into that little bit of a peak that is there, they sound pretty natural even. They have, again, nice, quick, aggressive attack on them, and then a nice natural amount of decay to them. But in the low end, and this is what surprised me, because people have talked up how much these slam, I really didn't get much slam from these. It's not devoid of slam. It's probably like, Sen HD 800S level kinds of punch to it, which isn't poor, but it's just not a feature of the sound. Like, it does not slam nearly to the extent of my memory of even the O2 or the Icon do. And I think part of that is because there's not great low frequency extension, and then that bit of a dip that I was talking about through the upper bass, lower mids, and then up into the mid range, like, it takes out some of the fullness and richness of the sound, which I think probably is an aspect to slam, because there's when a kick drum hits here, there is a bit of a pop, but there's just no convincing weight or authority behind it. So it's a little bit odd in that regard. So, like, I wouldn't call it slam. It's like, it's just, it's more of a instead of a. Hopefully the mic picked that up, if that makes sense. Like when you're supposed to get a, you get a in the slamminess to it, in my opinion there. So that was a little bit odd to me. So comparisons, and I think that's most of the sonic attributes of the sound. I have two other high-end closebacks in my personal collection that are still around. One would be the Focal Radiance, which did sell for, I think, what, $1,300? About $1,300 or $1,400, something like that. It's a limited edition, so I don't know if there are any more of these out there anymore. Okay, but I have that one I can compare this to, and then I have my Lawton modded TH900 with the Lawton Purple Heart chambers on them. Okay, now both of these are bassy, right? They have great bass extension. They slam like all get out. They hit hard and that sort of thing. They're very bass focused because I'm a bit of a bass head. Okay, these have a very V-shaped signature. These are more of like a warm dark. They still have some nice treble sparkle and presence to them, but like the treble presence is not what it is. It's not anywhere near like what the presence is in the deep bass here. And then again, these are V. I think the Verite closed is more resolving than either of these two. Not by a ton, and it's mostly in the micro detail. Like I just mentioned, like how this one does a good job of pulling out like bass overtones in the string action of bass guitars and that sort of thing. Room reverbs and all of that are just a little bit more clear, a little bit more convincing on the Verite than either of these two. But these two are not far behind in the resolution. These two are also going to be a little bit easier amp load just because we have 25 ohms and 32 ohms, and like these have, I think, 100-ish decibel sensitivity. This one not quite as high, but all that. So this one probably is the amp pickiest, not probably, is the amp pickiest of these three. These two are not as picky. They don't change their characters quite as much as the Fostex Lawton does on different amps. But to me, the big difference here, beyond the fact that these two can really, they extend way down deep in the bass, and they also have really good treble extension, so they have better frequency extension. They both have a more natural timbre to them, especially the Radiance. Why am I drawing a blank? The TH900 Lawton here can get a little bit sharp and hot in the treble, a little bit too elevated treble at times and with certain recordings, which can get fatiguing. And then depending on what amp you put them on, they can also get a little bit shouty in the mid-range. Their mid-range can sound really good. It's a bit recessed, but the tonality and the timbre can be really good depending on what amp you get in there. These basically always have excellent timbre and tonality. They sound smaller. They don't have as big a stage as the Verite closed does. They're not quite as sharp or as accurate in their imaging or in their separation, but they're also not far behind on those things either. But where these noticeably, other than that frequency extension and bass presence in the slam, where these noticeably come ahead of the Verite close, in my opinion, is with that timbre and the tonality. These have a much more natural sounding mid-range than these do. And that is really surprising to me because historically, and going through reviews and whatnot, it's ZMF that is lauded for that mid-range timbre. And Focal is usually the one that struggles. But in these particular cases, it's very much the other way around here. Now, just before I go, like, because I was so surprised at the timbre and tonality issues and then the lack of slam that I mentioned with these guys, I got my partner down here, and she is not an audiophile. Okay, she loves music. She will Bluetooth in and otherwise connect to all the various speaker and sound systems I have around the house, and she's just as prone to start playing music as I am. But she's not nearly to my level in the audio realm here, but I asked her to come listen to these. I didn't tell her anything about them other than she really loved the look of them. She said they were very pretty. She's right. Okay. But I just asked her to listen to whatever music she wanted to for a little bit on these, and then just tell me her impressions of them. And unprompted, without me trying to influence her on that, she came up with, she says, well, there's not much of what I think you would call punch or slam. She says there's not a lot of bass to it, period. And she says it was a little bit hollow sounding. She also mentioned the clarity. She said it was clean, it was clear. She says that there was a fair amount of space to them, but she definitely remarked that there's not a lot of bass presence, there's not a lot of punch or slam, and then that hollow nature to the tonality. She definitely mentioned that. So that told me that I wasn't too crazy and I wasn't losing the forest for the trees. If someone who is not trained up in listening to all of this and putting words to it can come up with that on their own, tells me something. Now, my bottom line here on these is they're not for me. There are some things to consider here with all of the different wood types and the stabilization versus not stabilized and all of that kind of stuff. There could be some impact that the cup material is having on that sound. So this may not be 100% representative of every Verite close that is out there. The other part of that is like the drawbacks in the timbre and the tonality and the lack of slam and all of that here are still, to me, within the range that I can get it. Even though it's not for me, it's within the range that a lot of people are still going to like these and are still going to just like their presentation and enjoy what they bring. Again, I'm not one of those people, but it's within the range that I can get it. I have heard other headphones within recent weeks and months where they are just critically flawed, and I know that we all have slight differences in physiological hearing abilities, but then massive differences in preferences that can affect how we perceive things. Okay, but those others were just beyond the point where I could in any way fairly recommend them because they were critically flawed. These are not critically flawed. They're just not quite tuned to my liking or to where I feel or where I was ever really able to get engaged with them. So, yeah, that's my takeaway on these. So, they're good. Many people will like them. I think they are a little bit too bass lean, a little bit too mid forward to be called accurate in timbre or tonality or that sort of thing, but for closed back, the staging and the spatial presentation is very good and very holographic. Okay, the detail is reasonably good. There's a lot of clarity here, and then of course the just world-class build quality and aesthetics. So there is a lot going for the Verite closed here. All right, I will leave it there. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the ZMF Verite closed. Thanks for watching. Hopefully my next big review out will be that Matrix Audio X-Saber 3 Pro DAC and streamer. So look for that soon. And then hopefully not long after that, I will be able to get part 4 of my Cables Matter series out. So thanks again for watching. I'm Wave Theory and enjoy the music.